I was ready to walk away from Tomb Raider: The Legend of Lara Croft after the first episode. Not because Netflix's latest animated video game adaptation is that bad, mind you, but its 35-minute premiere, which introduces us to Lara and many of the characters we've come to know from the more recent Tomb Raider games developed by Crystal Dynamics, just wasn't all that compelling. And the 7 episodes that follow never get any better. The story didn't grab me right away, and only gets more laughably dumb. The animation is both generic and minimalist, most of the attempts at humor fall flat, and the writers don't give the cast all that much to work with. It's okay, there's lots of globetrotting and some fun action, but if there's a season 2, I don't think I'll be tuning in.
What is it you're chasing?
The Legend of Lara Croft doesn't so much establish Lara's legend so much as her emotional burden.
What is it you're running from?
As we meet her here, played as well as anyone ever has by Hayley Atwell, aka the MCU's Peggy Carter, she's already been on many an archaeological adventure with her friends, but remains headstrong in her pursuit of ancient artifacts and keeps her best pals at an emotional arm's length. She never truly lets them in to see the real Lara, who's tortured by not just her father's pre-series death, but also that of her surrogate father and mentor, Roth, who dies in Lara's arms in a flashback sequence, and whose death she blames on herself.
You're a poison.
The thief is dead.
We also meet Jonah.
Sounds like you could use some help.
Earl Balin, reprising his role from the games, her right hand out in the field and voice of reason.
I brought this.
Zip, Alan Maldonado, her tech guru, who's the guiding voice in her ear and her eye in the sky. Sam Nishimura, Karen Fukuhara, her estranged best friend. And Camilla Roth, Zoe Boyle, her, other estranged best friend.
Why is everything so dramatic with you?
Before long, the villain enters the picture.
I think we got off on the wrong foot, Miss Croft.
Charles Devereaux, a what if Lara had gone bad caricature. He's voiced by Richard Armitage, aka Trevor Belmont from Netflix's stellar Castlevania series, so it's a bit strange hearing him as an antagonist here.
Miss Croft.
Obsessed with avenging his own father's death, Devereaux seeks a collection of mythological stones that promise great power as the means to exact his revenge upon those who took his father from him. But his quest quickly devolves into comic book-esque levels of camp, which seemed at silly odds with the supernatural-infused yet otherwise fairly serious tone of this show. Lara's 8-episode pursuit of Devereaux and the stones does what you'd expect from Tomb Raider and takes us to many locations around the world, from the Croft Manor that Lara doesn't seem to want to move into, to a nearby British museum, as well as farther off places like China, Paris, Persagadi, Mongolia, and more. Eagle-eyed Tomb Raider game fans might even recognize one or two of them, which is an appreciated nod to the source material of this show. Each episode takes us somewhere new, which helps the series avoid monotony from a visual perspective. And yes, tombs are raided and adventures are had. There's decent action and the occasional stab at humor, much of which misses, with one notable exception in episode 6, when Lara hilariously tries to get past a family of tourists at a theme park. But the aforementioned animation isn't up to the task of making any of it look all that interesting. Lots of backgrounds are still art, which would be forgiven if Tomb Raider leaned harder into a 70s or 80s animation aesthetic. Instead, the look of the show is one that seems cheap and rushed, with a few obvious 3D animated shots that look out of place compared to everything around them. Furthermore, aside from Jonah, Lara's friends aren't given much to do, nor much chance to break out of their generic sidekick roles. The worst offense, though, is the story. The plot quickly becomes so nonsensical that I probably wouldn't have minded it as a kid watching Tomb Raider on Saturday mornings, but I'm not. And this is most certainly not an animated series for kids on account of the copious, shrugged-off on-screen murders that earn this show a TV-14 rating. In fairness, a nonsensical plot is a criticism that could also be levied at many of the Tomb Raider games from all eras. Maybe it's no coincidence that my favorite is 2015's Rise of the Tomb Raider, which keeps things as grounded as the franchise ever has.
Stunning.
Perhaps fittingly, the inevitable face-off with the big bad plays out like it was cribbed from a video game boss battle, but not a good one.
If the real truth is too difficult for most to bear.
I have a bad feeling about this.
There are certainly pieces of the Legend of Lara Croft series that fans of the Tomb Raider games will recognize. Not just characters, but locations too, which adds a bit of extra fun for gamers watching this show. And outside of the main villain's arc, which had me rolling my eyes, the 8-episode story isn't bad. But just about everything else, characters, story, animation, is mediocre. And that's just not going to cut it in this age of peak TV, which has produced far better animated video game adaptations than this one. There's no reason for Netflix subscribers to waste their time on Tomb Raider: The Legend of Lara Croft when they could be watching the aforementioned Castlevania, so good it earned a spin-off, Cyberpunk Edgerunners, and the League of Legends-based Arcane.
You're a poison.
The thief is dead.
For more on the latest TV reviews, don't miss our full season reviews of The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, and The Penguin. And for everything else in the world of TV, movies, and video games, stick with IGN.